braided main lines have become almost an essential part of modern pike fishing. But why is that? And what makes them so good? And how do we use them? Well, in this short video, I want to have a look at some of those things and try and explain why they're so important. Now, I use braided main lines for most of my pike fishing, certainly all of my lure fishing and virtually all of my bait fishing. And they've got several benefits over modern nylon lines. I suppose the main benefit is how strong they are for the diameter. I mean, I tend to use the 65-pound PikePro Braid for all of my bait fishing, which is incredibly strong, yet it's only 0.4 millimeters thick. Now that's the equivalent of a nylon line of about 18 to 20 pound. So I'm getting 3 to 4 times the breaking strain that I would be getting out of a nylon for the same diameter. Now, if I was to use a high diameter nylon line, I'd probably struggle because unless I used a really big reel, it would come off in quite tight coils, which is quite difficult to use and can create a lot of problems when you're casting. Now, because braid's got no memory in it, it comes off of even quite a small spool. I mean, I tend to use a 10,000 size reel for most of my bait fishing. And braided line will come off a spool that size, no problem at all. It passes through the rings really, really easily. You don't need great big rings like you do on a carp rod if you're using mono. You can use smaller rings which are stronger. And you've got all the benefits of that really strong line without, again, massively cutting down your casting distance because it's not that thick. Now, the reason we use braided lines, I mean, PikePro, we sell them in 45-pound and 65-pound breaking strain, is because if you snag up, you want to be able to get the trace back. It's nothing worse than leaving tackle, baited treble hooks in the water. That's going to lead to damaged at best, or maybe even dead pike if you're not careful. So we need to do everything we can to make sure that we get the rigs back. So with an extra strong line like this and our treble hooks, what happens is if you pull for a break, it doesn't actually break. What tends to happen is you'll straighten the hooks. Yes, you've damaged the trace, but you've got that rig back and you haven't got a potential dead pike. So I tend to use the 65-pound. If I was fishing open water venues without any snags, then perhaps I might go down to the 45, but really I can't see the point in going any lighter than the 65-pound. Balanced out of a 40-pound trace, that works really, really well and won't give you any problems. Now, when you do pull for a break or pull to try and release a snag trace, whatever you do, don't pull it straight off the reel. Wrap the braid around something, not your arm, get a piece of stick or something like that, or a bank stick, wrap it around that a few times and then pull, and that'll take the pressure off the reel and not damage the reel. So one of the questions that we get asked a lot with braid is how to knot it. And really, it's not that difficult at all. The key thing really is to use a knot that you're confident in and you can tie properly. And so don't try and learn a special knot. I've tried a lot of knots over the years and I've found that I always come back to something that's fairly simple and that I tie all the time in different types of fishing. And by doing that, I know it's going to work effectively. And I tend to use a simple 4-turn grinner. But there's a couple of ways of tying it. And the second way I'll show you definitely gives you some extra breaking strain. But let's start off with a basic one. So I've got my 65-pound braid and just a normal PikePro swivel. This would normally be onto your trace or your up trace. It's top swivel. And all I've done, I've gone twice through the eye on the swivel and left myself about 6 inches of braid. And then I'm just going to tie a grinner. So I'm going to make a small loop, hold the loop. I've got the main line in this hand and then the tag end in my left hand because I'm right-handed. And then I'm going to make 4 turns, the braid through the loop and round the main line. Very, very simple. It's a knot most of us have probably learnt to tie at some time in our fishing. Wet everything and then pull it up fairly tight, don't go too tight just yet, and then pull the main line just to pull it down, check everything's nice and tight, and then you can cut it off. That's a pretty good knot, doesn't slip. I tend to leave the tag maybe a little bit longer, give myself a few millimeters, 5-6 millimeters, something like that. And that's not a bad knot, and that'll give you somewhere around 75% of the strength of the braid. It does dig in a little bit, and what you find with a lot of braids is what damages the knot strength is them bedding in especially when you get a snap pull, and that will cause some of the fibres to cut through each other and causes a knot to break. So there's quite a simple way of increasing the knot strength up to very close to actually 100% of what it says on the spool. And it's the same knot, but basically tied with a double length of line, which is a little bit more complicated. It takes a bit of practice, but it's not too bad. So what I'm going to do is start off by doubling over about 8 inches at the end of the braid, and then just wetting it to help them stick together. And then I'm going to go through the eye of the swivel once, and then through again. It helps to use quite a big swivel. It's not only the stronger, but they're easier to thread the braid through, especially when you haven't got great eyes like I haven't. And then what we're going to do is pretty much exactly the same. I'm going to make that small loop. So I've got the main line off to the rod and the reel in this hand. I've now got a tag there, and I'm making my loops now with this doubled end of the braid. I'm going to do exactly the same thing again, go through 4 times. Like I say, a bit more tricky. Make sure you get the tag to go around all the lengths of line. Don't miss any out, because that'll damage the knot strength. Wet it down again. Pull it down reasonably tight, not too tight just yet, and then let it slide down. Now what you're getting now is a tag, or a couple of tags, where you've doubled it over. So this is why it's important to bed this knot down quite slowly. I'm just going to pull on the little single tag now, just to take those loops out. Pull on the main line again, and make sure it's all snugged down. And then all you need to do is cut off the 3 tags that you've got now, the 2 from the loop and the single one. Cut them off again. I'll leave them a little bit long, 5 or 6 millimeters, and there you go. And we'll get a close-up of that knot so you can have a proper look at it. And there you go. That one takes a little bit more practice, but with that doubled grinner, you're going to get very close to 100% of the stated knot strength for the braid. And that works with most braids, to be honest. But it's the one I use all the time with the PikePro Braid, and it's very, very effective. So there you go. Mainline braids, very effective for your predator fishing. Allow you to fish with lines that are much heavier than your normal would, so you can pull rigs out, or even sometimes pull the whole snag out if you're lucky, without leaving baited traces in the water. Because it's got no memory, you don't lose the casting distance. It casts really well, sits on the reel really well with no problems at all. It's got a nice green colour, the PikePro Braid, which blends in well and lasts quite well. Some braids lose the colour quite quickly. This one actually holds on to it fairly well. And I suppose the other thing is it's quite fast sinking. It hasn't got added fibres in it, heavy fibres, which I find cut down on the casting distance a bit, but it does cut through the water surface pretty quick. And that makes it a nice braid to use, especially when you're ledgering, because you can get it through the surface film, tighten up to it, set your indicator and your alarm, and you're ready to go. Really nice braid. So there you go. That's the PikePro mainline braid. It's in the shops now.